"Ma'am, this isn't a camping trip. Hand over the blade." Sergeant Brad Keller pitched the command loud enough for the whole queue to hear the way a man performs when he thinks volume is the same thing as authority. Laughter crackled down the line of contractors and off-duty personnel, heat shimmering off the tarmac, the guard shack's tin roof ticking in the sun. The woman at the front, jeans gray t-shirt dust on her boots, didn't blink. She turned the knife hilt first steady as a plumb-line, eyes set not on Keller, but past his shoulder, as if the horizon mattered more than his temper. From 2 spots back, Ciepal Nico Torres didn't laugh. Torres noticed hands before faces the way a person met a tool told him more than small talk ever could, and Alexis Ward's hands didn't fidget or boast. They rested on the knife with the quiet certainty of muscle memory, the grip angled for control, not show. The other saw a civilian with attitude. Torres saw a stance weight, centered, knees loose, shoulders relaxed, head on a slow swivel that read the yard without advertising the scan. Keller swelled with the attention. "Rules are rules," he said, chin lifting toward the signboard. "No fixed blades like scripture." He saw a liability that would slow his lane. He saw an opportunity to remind the crowd who ran the gate. What he didn't see was the way Ward's breath stayed even 4 counts and 4 out, as if she were anchoring herself to something deeper than the moment. The forward operating base lived on edges wire policy rumor, and the gate was where those edges touched skin. Shipping containers made into offices squatted behind concrete barriers. Dust hung like a second sky. Every arrival carried a story, and sometimes trouble. Keller had learned to sort both by surface badges, bags, body language. It worked often enough to feel like wisdom. It failed just often enough to demand humility he hadn't yet learned. Ward didn't argue the rule or posture for the crowd. She merely offered the knife and kept her attention soft and wide. The grip Torres clocked it again wasn't the camera-friendly pinch of a hobbyist. It was closer to a carpenter's hold on a favorite chisel, closer to a climber's trust in a single point of contact. The steel itself was unremarkable at a glance, field-worn, no mirror, polish, vanity scales, stained by use, rather than oiled for a display case. A tool, not a trophy. Behind the glass, the duty clerk stamped badges. Generators droned, radios hissed with boredom's static. Keller's voice cut through it like a baton. "We have professionals to handle security," he said, gesturing at his MPs, who smirked on cue. Torres watched Ward's eyes track a shadow along the perimeter berm and return unhurried to the present. He felt the hair lift on his arms, though nothing officially had happened. The line inched forward. Keller reached for the knife, already composing the story he'd tell at Chow. Ward let him take it, fingers releasing without resistance, gaze still steady, feet still planted. The air pressed heavier, as if the base were holding its breath. And in that small, taut pause, before alarms, before radios came alive, before anyone knew whose judgment would matter, 3 names took their places at the edge of a lesson. Brad Keller, loud at the gate. Nico Torres, quiet in the queue. And Alexis Ward, calm as a plumb line waiting. The siren tore through the yard like a blade, high metallic, and close enough to feel in the teeth. Conversations snapped off mid-word. The guard shack door slammed. Hands went to rifles and radios in a flurry that looked like control from a distance and panic up close. Sergeant Brad Keller tried to take charge by volume, radio check cameras, up movement east, no west, but his orders collided in the air and fell uselessly to the concrete. The line at the gate compressed instinctively, people trying to become smaller targets without moving their feet. Through all of it, Alexis Ward stayed exactly where she was, the quiet center of a storm she refused to acknowledge. She didn't lunge, didn't crouch, didn't even glance at the fixed blade Keller had parked on the desk like a trophy. Knees, soft shoulders, quiet, chin level. Ward held the unshowy stance of someone who's been under stress long enough to discard theatrics. Only her eyes moved slow and steady, sweeping the wire with the kind of wide focus that collects small truths the way a still pond collects leaves. CPL. Nico Torres noticed her breathing measured and measured out and found his own breath falling into the same rhythm without meaning to. The siren bored into bone. Heat shimmered over the berm. Dust hung in a curtain waiting for a wind that hadn't chosen a direction. Torres raised his binoculars and saw only glare. Keller stepped into his sightline and shouted for the tower to sweep sectors that were already assigned. Two MPs sprinted to the barrier console and nearly collided. A contractor ducked behind a pallet of water and pretended to vanish. The yard filled with motion that didn't help. Ward's voice did. Northeast corner, 2 o'clock off the water tower, single mover low. No bark, no tremor, no drama, just a clean line of data milled square and true. Torres pivoted to the clock in his head tower at 12. 2 o'clock meant the right-hand culvert. He lifted glass again, and blessed by timing, caught a ripple where dead grass slid the wrong direction. Whoever it was hugged the seam where chain link met drainage, exactly where cameras blew out in midday glare. That wasn't luck, that was craft. I don't see a damn thing, Keller snapped, squinting into the sun, his voice gone thin under the siren. He keyed the net to demand confirmation he didn't need and lost the sentence halfway through. Ward tipped her head a degree the way a hunter finds the wind. Nothing else about her changed. Torres flicked from her face to the fence and back, and an old range truth shouldered forward. When the calm one talks, you listen. He thumbed transmit. Tower check, 2 o'clock off the water tower, northeast corner, ground line. Static scratched, then a muttered curse. Bloom on camera, 3 possible contact, can't hold it, the tower replied. Keller tried to herd his MPs toward the wrong lane, replacing plan with volume. Ward kept her hands low and visible, as if to underline that she wasn't the armed party here. Her eyes did the work. Gap in your patrol route, she said. Voice, even as if noting a missing signature on a form. Culvert masks approach for 30 meters. Your alarms don't cover the junction box. Torres felt the map of the gate redraw itself in his head. That wasn't desk knowledge. That was fieldcraft, the habit of seeing seams and deciding what you'd do with them if they were yours. Copy, he told the tower. Shift long lens to junction box, NE corner. Send one to eyes on. Why the junction box? Keller demanded heat and pride mixing poorly. Ward answered without edge. Fastest way to blind a system is to kill its eyes. That's where I'd start. She didn't add, if I were coming for you. The siren hiccuped half a skip in the whales so small it could have been imagination, then clawed back to full. Torres heard it. Keller didn't. Ward didn't look away. There she said. They touched it. Torres lowered the binoculars and met Keller's eyes. We move on her call, he said. Not loud, but in the tone enlisted men save for facts you can hang a life on. For the first time that day, Keller paused. The silence lasted exactly a breath and weighed more than a paragraph of orders. Then the yard finally moved with direction rather than noise. 2 MPs to the berm, 1 to the console tower slewing the long glass to 2 o'clock, and a corporal with clear eyes trusting a civilian because she sounded like someone who had done this more times than she cared to count. They found the prints first light, deliberate toeing the fence where ditch met gravel. Then a gloved smear on the junction box latch. Torres called it in. The tower confirmed a faint heat bloom on the seam. Detain Keller began, and Ward said, hold at the same moment. Her word landed first. If they wired the door, don't give them the satisfaction, she added, almost conversational. Take the panel from the hinge side. Torres relayed the method. The team complied. Hinge bolts came free without a spark. Inside, a fresh scuff on the insulator and a nick on the primary told the rest of the story. Whoever was out there had fingers on their eyelids and almost succeeded. Keller stared at the mark as if it had answered back. Ward just kept breathing the way she'd been breathing since the siren began steady and steady out, 1 second at a time until the job was done. In the charged quiet that followed, Torres realized he'd already shifted allegiance, not away from rank, but toward competence, and that he'd remember that choice long after the siren's echo had drained from the wire. Then Alexis Ward moved. It wasn't dramatic. No crouch, no wind-up, no barked warning. She simply reached to the desk where Sergeant Brad Keller had parked her knife, rolled it into her palm, and let it settle the way a craftsman settles a favorite tool handle, kissing callous balance found without looking. CPL. Nico Torres saw the smallest test of weight at her wrist, as if she were confirming center of gravity the way a carpenter thumbs a hammer. The siren's wail gnawed at the edges of thought. Radio traffic rasped and stepped on itself. Somewhere out past the berm, a patient shape hugged the fence line and counted on confusion to do the rest. Ward lifted her chin a degree, reading the shimmer over the northeast corner like a weather sign, then flipped the knife along her fingers until the blade kissed light. The motion that followed lived in one smooth line from heel to shoulder. No wasted muscle, no flourish. If you blinked, you missed it. The blade left her hand perfectly flat. No tumble, no wobble, riding its own slipstream, the way a well-thrown stone skims a pond. Torres's mouth was already open to tell her not to. When his brain caught up, the throw wasn't a guess. It was math. 200 yards is a long story to tell with steel, but the knife told it clean. The junction box yawned on its hinge side where the team had eased it open, a tangle of armored cable throwing heat waves in the sun. A bright nick on the primary had already confessed an intruder's touch. The blade arrived like a period at the end of a sentence, one neat decisive tap, and drove the severed lead back against the terminal post, pinning copper to copper through its own mass. The circuit closed. The klaxon died mid-shriek, cutting off so abruptly the silence felt physical, like a door slamming on your eardrums. Radios freed from the electronic howl came into focus, as if someone had cleared a throat. Gate tower, comms clean. I have movement any culvert. The overwatch snapped suddenly crisp, now that the net wasn't drowning. QRF on Ward's callout. Torres said, already trotting low along the barrier to keep the sightline. He didn't look back to see if Keller followed. He didn't need permission to move toward competence. The quick reaction team flowed from cover with purpose instead of noise, two peeling to the ditch, one climbing the catwalk to hold glass on the seam. Orders sounded different now, short, unadorned, the way professionals talk when they stop performing for each other. Keller stood where he was, eyes ping-ponging between the now quiet junction box and Ward's empty hand. The earlier swagger had drained away, leaving a blank canvas where realization would soon be painted. "That's not possible," he heard himself say, too softly to be an argument and too loudly to be a prayer. Ward didn't answer him. She didn't seem to notice him. She tracked the team's approach by sound more than sighthead, canted to catch the rhythm of boots and breath fingers open at her sides, as if resisting the muscle memory that wanted to do more. "Watch the culvert lip," she said, not a command, just a fact. "If he's smart, he left you something to trip on." "Frontman check right slow," Torres relayed. The point operator slid his boot along concrete and found two lines of monofilament stretched ankle-high, nearly invisible in the glare. He cut them with a gloved pinch and looked back a wordless thanks sent downrange to a woman in jeans who shouldn't have known that detail, and did. "Contact," the second operator breathed a beat later. "Single male prone ditch side trying to worm back under chain link. Not armed that I can see." The team stacked, pinned, rolled, and cuffed in a smooth sequence that would have looked like choreography if it hadn't been punctuated by grunts and grit. Secure came over the net calm as a weather report. Only then did Keller seem to rejoin the moment. He looked at Ward as if light were coming from behind her. She had stepped a half-pace back from the desk, giving his men more space than they needed, eyes still on the corner of fence that had tried to swallow their day. In the hard quiet that follows, a crisis small sound stood out. The tick of cooling metal, a bottle of water settling the dry rasp of dust under a boot heel. Torres felt the lesson settling too. When someone gives you the exact piece you need at the exact second you need it, titles and first impressions shrink to size. The radio crackled again. "Tower copies intruder in custody junction box stabilized. Nice work on the line." A second voice, the duty officer, broke in tone, edged with curiosity. "Gate confirm who threw the... Correction, how did you close the circuit?" Torres glanced at Ward. She shook her head once, a quiet refusal to step into a spotlight she hadn't asked for. "Gate copies, sir." Torres answered. He let his eyes linger a fraction of a second on the pinned cable 200 yards away and chose the simplest thing he could say. "We had help." Keller swallowed hard. The words he'd thrown at Alexis Ward 10 minutes earlier felt suddenly heavy and small in his mouth. He opened his hand toward the desk, toward the space where her knife had been, and found nothing to hold on to but the fact of what he'd just seen. One calm person ending the noise so everyone else could do their jobs. For a long beat, the gate stayed dead quiet, and in that hush, the pecking order rearranged itself into something truer than stripes and volume. The radios were still crackling with after-action confirmations when the Black Command SUV rolled to a hard stop at the gate. Dust settled across the concrete in a thin veil as Colonel Raymond Pierce stepped out, cover on sleeves-down expression carved from the same rock as the Hesco barriers. He didn't waste a glance on the gawkers or the cuffed intruder being walked past the Jersey barriers. His eyes tracked the two things that mattered, the junction box 200 yards off with a knife visibly pinning the cable, and Alexis Ward standing a half-pace back from the desk, hands empty, posture quiet and ready. Sergeant Keller Pierce said, voice even and unhurried, which somehow made it land harder. Status. Keller swallowed, finding the military muscle memory of reporting when his pride could not. Sir, perimeter breach identified and contained. QRF secure. Alarm silenced. He faltered, motioning toward the distant box. By civilian assistance. Pierce let the answer hang. He pivoted to CPL, Nico Torres. Corporal Sir Torres replied crisp. Ms. Ward provided the call out 2 o'clock off the tower, single mover low, and closed the circuit so we could hear each other. QRF rolled on her data. 1 in custody, no friendlies injured. The colonel nodded once, as if checking a box in his head, then turned to the guard shack. Laptop, he said. Open the personnel portal. Search Ward Alexis. He did not ask whether they had authority. Officers of his stripe carried their own. The screen's glare fought the sun. Torres typed the cursor, blinking like a heartbeat. A list popped, mostly contractors and base workers. Pierce's finger tapped the 4th line down. That one. The next page did not load like a normal record. It tunneled. A login prompt, then a second factor, then a warning banner so severe it read like a dare. Pierce keyed in a code from the laminated card in his wallet, and the file resolved into blocks of text with as many black bars as words. Even the redactions seemed to radiate heat. Read it, Pierce said. Torres cleared his throat. Name Ward, Alexis M. Status, attached, Joint Special Operations Command. Unit 1st, Special Forces Operational Detachment Delta. He paused. Eyes flicking to Ward and back. Qualifications: advanced infiltration, hostage rescue, counter-assault, sensitive site exploitation, breaching, irregular entry. Decorations: Distinguished Service Cross, Silver Star with Valor, Bronze Star, Purple Heart. Operational history redacted. He scrolled. Additional notes: Instructor precision entry, unconventional access, non-ballistic solutions. Keller's face drained a full shade. The words landed like quiet hammer blows, each one less forgivable than the last. The man who had been loudest at the gate found he had nothing at all to say. Pierce didn't look triumphant. He looked relieved. The kind of relief older soldiers feel when the universe briefly shows order. He stepped forward and stopped exactly 1 pace from Ward. The shift in his shoulders told everyone watching that this was not a reprimand, not even a debrief. This was ceremony. Ms. Ward, he said, and for the first time there was a hint of warmth in his tone that was clean work. My people will secure your blade so it's not cooking in the sun. You can retrieve it when EOD signs off on the box. He drew a breath, squared himself, and brought his hand up in a slow, deliberate salute, 2 beats longer than regulation, exactly as long as respect required. Ward, who had met bluster with silence all morning, returned it with the same economy she had shown in everything else. No smile, no nod, just acknowledgement between professionals who'd both been around long enough to skip the part where they pretended to be surprised by competence. Pierce let his hand fall and turned to his gate team. Lesson time, he said, voice traveling without strain. You saw a civilian with a knife. You decided the story in your head was the truth in front of you. Ms. Ward is here because we asked her here. People like her don't advertise. They show up, they do the work, and they leave you better than they found you if you're smart enough to notice. Keller stood at attention because that was all he had left that looked like dignity. Sir, he managed no excuse. I save it for later. Sergeant Pierce cut in not unkindly. You'll get your chance to say the right words to the right person. For now, learn the right lesson. He looked to Torres. Corporal, get a photo of that junction box from here. Frame of reference matters. Torres lifted his phone, centered the distant glint of steel, pinning copper, and took the shot. He knew without being told that the picture would outlive the incident. It would be an arrow on a map, a dot on a timeline, a story new arrivals would hear before they pulled a shift. By afternoon, the unofficial name had already taken root over coffee and radio checks. Ward's line, someone said, pointing from the gate shack to the northeast corner. Not a boast, not a plaque, just a shared understanding that a straight edge had been drawn across their standard. The nickname stuck because it fit. It said, "This is where the noise ended and the work began." Pierce lingered a moment longer the way men do when they're trying to fix a mental photo in place. He looked at Ward, then at his soldiers. "My ops cell will coordinate with you," he told her. "If you're willing, we'd value an hour with the team. Behavioral tells what you saw, what we missed." Ward's answer was as plain as her movements. "Happy to help," she said. "Start with slowing your eyes. People tell on themselves if you let them." "Copy that," Torres murmured half to himself. The colonel nodded once more and the SUV door thumped shut. Engines turned, the vehicle rolled, and the gate returned to the kind of quiet that doesn't mean nothing's happening, just that the right people are now doing it. Keller stayed put for another long beat, then took a breath and went to face the person who had made him small with skill instead of shouting. Out past the wire, the sun hammered the earth. Inside the fence, a different kind of heat cooled, and on the angle from the shack to the box, a straight line had a new name that everyone understood without being told. They didn't hang a banner or hold a formation. Change arrived the way good habits do, quietly, then all at once. By week's end, Sergeant Brad Keller had orders sliding across a clipboard reassignment to supply. No public shaming, no snide comments, just a new duty title and a warehouse badge. He signed, nodded once, and carried boxes the way a man carries a lesson. CPL, Nico Torres, walked the opposite road. He put in for reconnaissance selection with a packet as neat as a right dress formation and a cover letter that began. Request based on observation of Alexis Ward's method slow. The eyes read the tells. Colonel Raymond Pierce initialed it on the spot. Earn it, he said, and keep your mouth shut while you do. The guard shack changed too. A small hand-built plaque appeared next to the radio rack, nothing fancy. Just a section of armored cable mounted to a scuffed board. 2 clean holes ran through copper and sheath, a metal signature you could fit your finger through. Beneath it, in burned letters, the line that would outlast the dust and the deployment cycles. Assumptions are heavier than gear. Carry them wisely. No one needed to explain it. Every new MP was brought to that board on day one and told the ward's line story from the angle that mattered the gap between what you think you see and what's actually there. Training rewrote itself. The checklist stayed, but it moved to page 2. Page 1 became behavior hands breath, feet gaze. Who scans like a tourist and who scans like a hunter. Who talks to fill silence and who saves breath for work. The volume on the catcalls dropped. The tightness on the cordon rose. You could feel it in the way the gate breathed, less noise, more seeing. Ward never lectured. She ran short, brutal drills, and when they got it right, she said, "Good once, like a stamp." That was enough. If you've worn a uniform, you know the kind of memory that matters isn't etched in marble. It's etched in muscle. This one stuck. And for those of us with a little gray at the temples, the moral is simple and worth passing on. Judge slower. Respect first, let skill speak. If this story rings true, drop a comment with the best quiet professional you ever served with, and subscribe for more lessons from the folks who prove it rather than shout it. Out at the wire, the sun still hammers the earth. Inside the fence, the work is calmer now and better for it.